he was shopping his mates, and he sort of panicked, and in a desperate way to try and get himself out of it, he said, "Oh, look, if you leave me alone, if you don't go after me, I'll give you phone numbers of other gay MPs and leave them to be set up," which is obviously appalling. But also his background is that he's often been quite sanctimonious, calling for colleagues to resign and being quite judgmental about colleagues who've had far more modest misdemeanors. So no, there's no way around it. It's cringe-making.
William Wragg, the chairman of a Common Select Committee, the vice chairman of the 1922 Committee of Tory backbenchers. Let's talk to Harry Phibbs, columnist at Conservative Home. Harry, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, this story was broken by the Times' Aubrey Allegretti. It's his byline there on the front page, chief political correspondent. What do you make of it?
Oh, I think this is awful. I mean, normally one would like to have sympathy for someone who gets caught up in a scrape, is set up. But in this particular case, it's hard to have that. First of all, of course, as Dawn Butler was mentioning in the news bulletin, that he was shopping his mates, and he sort of panicked, and in a desperate way to try and get himself out of it, he said, "Oh, look, if you leave me alone, if you don't go after me, I'll give you phone numbers of other gay MPs and leave them to be set up," which is obviously appalling. But also his background is that he's often been quite sanctimonious, calling for colleagues to resign and being quite judgmental about colleagues who've had far more modest misdemeanors. So no, there's no way around it. It's cringe-making.
Well, there might be no way around it, you say, Harry, but he won't be the first MP to have cast stones at others while they themselves might be in glass houses. What kind of response are you getting from your sources in the Conservative Party and in the party in the country? Are they being as harsh as you, or are they being a bit more concerned for his welfare?
I think they're being pretty well. It's a mix. It's both, of course, but they're being pretty harsh, probably rather more harsh than I am, saying, he must resign immediately, and what appalling betrayal. I think there's also a wider point that a lot of conservative grassroots activists, not just conservative MPs, but grassroots activists that we're in touch with, obviously on Conservative Home, are concerned about the vetting and the selection of conservative candidates, and that whole process, because there's been quite a move in the Conservative Party since David Cameron became leader of wanting to have less emphasis on politics, if you like, and more emphasis on it being a career, and so people coming through quite quickly who haven't had any previous involvement in politics, and that sounds quite attractive. But you do need to have people who are motivated for the right reasons, and it's better for people to have a political motivation, that they've got things they believe in, that they've got, in the case obviously Conservative Party, conservative beliefs, rather than personal motivation. And
well, hang on a second,
all being
Harry.
an ego trip.
Hang on a second, Harry. I mean, I don't know William Wragg. I've just read up about him, and I've been aware of him for a number of years. I mean, he's a select committee chairman. He's been vice chairman of the backbench 1922 committee. He may only be 36, but he's been an MP for nearly 9 years, and he was in the Common Sense group, the European Research Group. He clearly has a belief system.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure he does have any very clear beliefs, but that, I mean,
well, he was a hard Brexiteer. I think he believes in small government. He hates wokery.
Yes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite well whether he's just is ticking boxes, or whether he's got any genuinely deep-seated beliefs. But I was really meaning it. I mean, I was really, in terms of you were asking about concerns more broadly.
Yeah.
Rather that would be. I mean, and of course we're all. Sort of humanity is flawed, and of course this will happen in different. I mean, you can't get round it, and this will, obviously we can go back to previous generations and scandals, and I'm sure that it'll it'll be happening in future generations and both political parties, and it's impossible to safeguard against it. But I do think that a broader point is that the motivation for people going into politics for their own sake as well, that if they've got the right motives, they're a bit more likely to cope with what's a very strange career, but it's a lot of pressure and and difficult to withstand. And if they actually have a core of believe of believing
But Harry,
in what they're doing,
Harry,
that
come
would
on.
help.
If you go back, there are many, many MPs on all sides of the House who've had really serious core beliefs. Look at Cecil Parkinson, Margaret Thatcher's favourite colleague. I mean, he fathered a child out of wedlock and was believed to have turned his back on her for quite some time. There are many I could mention. Really dyed in the wool blue conservatives, but people are weak. I mean, William Wragg said, I was weak. I was weak. We are made of flesh. We are fallen. And perhaps that is the attitude to take, even though one would agree you shouldn't have given the names and details of other MPs you believe to be gay. Yes, that is a degree of betrayal, but the man panicked.
Yes, and you get people are flawed, and you get, of course, it's not always sex; it's sometimes money,
Yep.
and yeah. I think probably the reality is that it's. I mean, this is an excruciating situation to have happened, and I'm not sure. I think you're probably right. There isn't an answer to it. This will keep happening, and there's no foolproof way of preventing it.
Right, yeah. I mean, in recent weeks and months, we've learned, obviously, that British MPs and indeed the Electoral Commission were the target of hackers from China. MPs of all stripes need to be on the highest possible alert now, don't they? Do you think they need a refresher course or something?
Well, it can't do any harm. I suppose. I suppose possibly the situation will get worse in that if it's obviously in terms of the danger of blackmail and particularly of hostile states being involved. I mean, the world does seem to be becoming a more dangerous place at the moment, and so I suppose to that extent, more MPs will be targeted, and it will be more. It's obviously much more serious if it's a hostile government trying to blackmail people than if it's a sort of tabloid newspaper doing a sting operation. Yeah, I don't think the outlook's particularly promising. But of course, when something like this does happen, that does send a pretty powerful message to the other 650 MPs, and we have to remember, of course, there are a large number of them who are decent, normal, dedicated, responsible people, and it sends them a message to be very careful in how they conduct their affairs.
Indeed. Harry Phibbs, columnist at Conservative Home, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Harry was pretty hard on William Wragg, you might think, but he says he's just mirroring what other people on the Conservative Home website and backbench Tory MPs feel. They think that what William Wragg has done is pretty bad. They don't really want to forgive him, but what do you think? Because, we are but flesh. Some of us will be pompous and say all kinds of things and we'll be in a glass house, and you shouldn't throw stones if you are in one.